It was supposed to be just a quiet getaway. A simple woman, bundled in a worn-out jacket and carrying an old pair of thrift-store skis, stepped into the glittering world of a high-end ski resort. Surrounded by polished boots, flashy snow gear, and expensive equipment, she stood out like a sore thumb. Whispers followed her up the slopes, laughter, side eyes. Some even pulled out their phones, nudging each other and snickering. To them, she didn't belong here. To them, she was just another nobody trying to play in a world built for the rich. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know the countless hours she'd spent training on icy backroads and snow-covered hills near her home. They didn't see the calluses on her hands from gripping worn poles, or the quiet fire in her eyes that had been burning for years. What they saw was someone they could underestimate, and that was their biggest mistake. The ski resort had an annual race, a tradition filled with fierce competition, elite athletes, and pride on the line. And despite the snickers and snide comments, she signed up. People scoffed. One man joked he'd beat her with one leg tied behind his back, but she said nothing, just nodded, tightened her boots, and took her place at the starting line. What happened next left the crowd speechless. With every turn down the slope, every second shaved off the clock, she wasn't just skiing, she was making a statement. Her thrift-store skis cut through the snow like they were made of gold. But did she really break the resort's long-standing record? Did the underdog from nowhere actually defeat the best of the best? Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. Her name was Ellie. No coach, no sponsors, and definitely no spotlight. She grew up in a small mountain town where snow was more common than streetlights, and skiing wasn't a hobby, it was survival. While other kids spent weekends at malls or movie theaters, Ellie was hiking uphill with secondhand skis strapped to her back, sliding down icy trails with no fancy lifts or groomed slopes. Her gear? Pieced together from garage sales and thrift shops. But what she lacked in money, she made up for in sheer grit. She wasn't looking to prove anything when she came to the resort. It was a chance encounter, a flyer at a gas station, a race open to all, and something in her just said, asterisk, why not asterisk? Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a chance to test herself against the best. But the moment she stepped into that lodge, she realized she was walking into more than just a competition. It was a world where people wore brands like armor and judged you by the shine of your skis. And Ellie, she had none of that. Whispers followed her everywhere. One group of skiers even asked if she was lost. Another offered her better gear as a joke. No one thought she would actually race, let alone finish. But what they didn't see was the years of quiet determination behind her eyes. The kind you don't get from money or medals. The kind you earn, fall after fall, on cold mountains with no audience. As she stood at the starting line, goggles fogged and heart pounding, she didn't flinch. Not when the elite racers smirked, not when the announcer mispronounced her name. She just looked down that slope like it was hers. Because maybe, just maybe, it always had been. The crowd barely noticed when Ellie pushed off the starting line. The announcer gave her a quick, dismissive mention before turning his attention to the favorites. Names people recognized, athletes with sponsorships and flashy gear. But one person did notice. Jake. He was a former champion, sidelined this year by an injury, and now watching from the sidelines with a knee brace and a clipboard. He wasn't caught up in the hype. He'd seen enough races to know when someone had real control, and Ellie had it. The way she leaned into each turn, the way her body moved with the slope, not against it, there was something different about her. Meanwhile, inside the lodge, a group of top competitors gathered around a screen, waiting for split times to update. Some were still laughing about the thrift-store skier, calling her a fluke, a tourist. Others were starting to look uneasy. Her times were coming in fast, too fast. Not beginner fast, not even intermediate. We're talking record-chasing numbers. And that's when things got tense. No one wanted to believe it, but the digital clock didn't lie. Outside, the wind picked up and snow began to fall harder. The slope was turning slick, making every second more dangerous. One wrong move, one missed edge, and it was over. But Ellie didn't back down. She sped up. At each checkpoint, the crowd started to quiet. People moved closer to the edge of the fence, trying to get a glimpse. Phones went up, and still no one really knew who she was. Jake leaned forward, squinting at the feed. "Where did she learn that?" he muttered under his breath. Back in the lodge, someone whispered, "She's not supposed to be doing this." But Ellie wasn't thinking about them. She was chasing something else, and she was getting closer. Ellie hit the final stretch of the course like a shadow moving through snow. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were silent, eyes wide, breaths held. All around the ski resort, people had stopped what they were doing. Waiters froze mid-service, kids pressed their faces to the glass, and the race officials began checking the record board, almost in disbelief. The numbers flashing across the screens didn't make sense. Not for someone like her. Not with that gear. Not with no team behind her. At the bottom of the hill, a group of elite racers, men and women who had trained with the best and traveled the world, stood with arms crossed, watching. Some were shaking their heads. Others clenched their jaws. One of them, a recent silver medalist, muttered, "She's going to steal the title." But no one answered. The truth was hanging heavy in the air. Ellie wasn't just racing anymore. She was rewriting the rules. High above, Jake watched her descent with an almost nervous focus. He'd seen hundreds of racers, but never anyone with this kind of rhythm, like she was in sync with the mountain. He grabbed his radio. "Clock her at the last checkpoint. Now." A voice crackled back. "She's 6 seconds ahead of record pace." Back on the slope, Ellie's skis chattered against the ice. Her arms were burning, breath tight, legs numb. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't. She was close, so close. And for the first time, the doubt that had followed her like a shadow began to lift. She didn't need permission to belong here. She just had to finish. The final turn was brutal, a steep, narrow curve known for wrecking even seasoned racers. Cameras zoomed in. The crowd leaned forward. And then right at that edge, everything held still. As Ellie approached that final curve, every muscle in her body screamed. The narrow drop was known among pros as the snap, a name earned from the number of racers who'd crashed or lost their lead right there. One mistake, one slip, and she'd tumble out of the race and straight into a footnote. But she didn't hesitate. She leaned in hard, trusting her instincts, trusting those battered thrift-store skis that had carried her farther than anyone thought possible. And then, just as she cleared the curve, a sharp whistle cut through the cold air. A flag shot up at the finish line. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. The announcer's voice stumbled, then went silent. Something was wrong. A race official turned pale, speaking rapidly into a headset. Ellie, unaware of the chaos below, was seconds away from the final descent. The twist? Someone had lodged a formal protest. An anonymous claim had come in, mid-race, questioning whether Ellie's gear violated equipment rules. The timing was no coincidence. The complaint was aimed at stopping her before she crossed that finish line, before the clock made her a record breaker. Some racers on the sidelines exchanged glances. One of them smirked. The same man who had mocked her earlier now stood with folded arms, watching the officials scramble. Jake's face tightened. He knew this tactic. Technicalities, delays, attempts to rattle someone mid-run. He grabbed his radio again. "Don't you dare wave her off. Let her finish." But the judges were split. Some were checking regulations, others on their phones. Meanwhile, Ellie sped down the final stretch, unaware that her biggest obstacle wasn't the mountain anymore. It was the system trying to stop her before she ever had the chance to win. And just ahead, the finish line was getting closer. But so was the storm. Ellie flew down the final slope, eyes locked on the finish line, completely unaware of the protest swirling behind her. Snow lashed at her face as the wind picked up, but she didn't blink. The crowd parted as people rushed to the sidelines, cameras raised, breath held. Then she crossed. The clock flashed bright red. The numbers blinked. And just like that, the impossible happened. She didn't just beat the record, she shattered it. The silence broke into chaos. Cheering, shouting, reporters swarming. Jake stood frozen for a second, then dropped his clipboard and ran toward the finish. But before anyone could reach her, the loudspeaker crackled back to life. Attention! Due to a pending protest concerning unauthorized equipment, today's results are under review. The crowd's cheers faltered. Ellie, bent over with her hands on her knees, looked up in confusion. "What?" she asked a nearby official. No one answered. Jake finally reached her, face red from the cold and frustration. "It's politics," he said quietly. "Someone's trying to disqualify you." Ellie looked down at her old thrift store skis, still dusted with fresh snow. "They think these are an advantage?" she asked, half laughing. And just then, a voice cut through the noise. A sharp, confident voice from the crowd. A woman stepped forward, a former Olympic judge, apparently vacationing at the resort. "Those skis," she said, pointing, "are legal. I used the same model in competition years ago. This protest is nonsense." The officials went silent. Someone confirmed the specs. And just like that, the protest collapsed. But the twist: Ellie didn't stay for the celebration. Before the medals, the interviews, or the headlines, she quietly left. No social media, no glory chase. Just a note left with Jake. "I didn't come to win. I came to remind myself I still could." In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire across the ski resort and far beyond. Headlines popped up everywhere. Asterisk unknown woman breaks ski record with thrift store gear asterisk. Social media buzzed with clips of her run, people replaying the moment she crossed the finish line like it was something out of a movie. But no one could find her. Ellie had vanished as quietly as she arrived. Jake kept her note folded in his jacket pocket, reading it more than once. He even tried to track her down, called around, asked old ski instructors, checked small-town race records, but Ellie remained a mystery. And maybe that was the point. She didn't want to be famous. She didn't need a podium or a sponsor. She just needed to prove to herself that she could still fly. Back at the resort, things changed. The elite racers who once laughed began to train harder, talk less. The lodge replaced a photo on their wall of legends with a still frame of Ellie mid-run, face-focused, wind in her hair, thrift store skis slicing through snow like a blade. And every newcomer who passed it heard the same story, that it's not about the gear, the brand, or who's watching. It's about the heart you bring to the slope. Ellie's story reminded everyone that skill can come from anywhere. That quiet strength is often the most powerful, and that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who teach us the most. Some say she's still out there, skying the quiet trails, training in the shadows. But whether she returns or not doesn't matter. Because in one run, with old skis and no crowd behind her, she changed the game forever and proved that greatness doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears secondhand boots and just shows up.